Welcome back, guys. Alright, so this is episode 6 of our Learning MonoGame tutorial. So if you would like to start from episode 1, I'll put the link up now, and as well as in the description. Alright, so in this tutorial what we're doing is continuing on with our making a neon vector shooter in XNA tutorial, so we're implementing it in MonoGame. Alright, so from episode 1 to 5, we've done all of this. We've got enemies, we've got collision, we've got the enemy spawner. Last episode we did scoring and lives, and this episode we're gonna implement a high score system, right? So the player has a score to aim for. Okay, so this is a really short section in the tutorial, but I think you will find if you're implementing this in MonoGame, you will find that there are a few little gotchas here. And I spent the better part of today and last night trying to figure out how to get this working, but I've got it working, so I think we're all good. I'll go through them now. Okay, so let's go through the tutorial first. So pretty simple stuff. So in the first bit, we're looking into the player status class, which we created in the last episode. And we're going to define a static file. So this is one of the first hiccups actually. But anyway, let's just keep progressing on until we run into it. Okay, so declare a static file. It's called highscore.txt. Now this is the file that we're going to store the current high score into. And it's just a text file. Nothing too elaborate. If the player decided to open that file manually and edit it, you could probably do that and have a really high score. Although why would you do that? I don't know. And then we've got the load high score method here. All this method does. Let's just open this up in my code. All right, play status. We've got the high score here, declaring that string, and then we've got the load high score method here. So yeah, so you'll notice that mine is a little bit more verbose. So in the load high score, basically all we're doing here is checking if the high score file exists or not. And if it does exist, get the value out of it and make sure that it returns an int. So this is just to check if the player did edit that file, that it's at least a valid integer number that we can use as a high score. And if it is, then we get that value, see this out score, so this is a little bit weird. Int.tryPass, what it does is it tries to pass whatever that string is and then return it as an integer into this variable score, see out score, and then we just return that value score. So it sets this load high score, just sets the score for the game. Okay, so for the game loop as it's running. Now the next one that we've got is the save high score method down here. And basically all this does is it gets the current score from the game, from the player, from the previous run, and then it writes it to that high score file, so high score file name, as a string, obviously, because it's a text file, and this write all requires a string. So we write that into the file as a string, and yep, simple enough. Okay, so we're gonna go down. Now this is where it gets a little bit hairy because, well, not in the tutorial. In the tutorial, all we're doing is defining this is game over status, and that returns true if the player has 0 lives. So game over if there's 0 lives left, right? Or false if the player still has lives, and then it just keeps going. The game keeps rolling on, right? What we want to do is when the game is in a game over state, we would like to pause the game and then show the player his score, the score that he got in his previous run, and how that compares to the current high score, right? So just check if he's got a high score or not. So that's why we've got this is game over state, just to track that status. And then in the constructor for the player status, we've just got set the high score variable. So this is the first little bit that in the tutorial the author forgot or didn't feel like it was necessary to put it in because it's fairly obvious. Under player status, we've got this high score. He doesn't say, player status in the constructor for player status. He doesn't state that this high score isn't declared earlier on in the code up here. So make sure you declare that as a public static int and call it high score up there, and you'll be sorted out. I mean, when you type that in and try to put this code in, you'll get an error anyway. So that's something that you should be able to fix pretty quickly and easily. Oh yeah, and the other thing is when you're running load high score down here, the other hiccup, this load high score method, see it's using file here. At the top of your code, you get a little error here saying I don't know what file is. You have to also put in using system.io, which is also not mentioned in the tutorial. Alright, so those are the first two real easy hiccups that you'll run into. We're going to get a little bit hairier later on. Okay, so further down, also in your reset method, what we want to do is if the player in the previous run got a score that was greater than the high score, than the current high score, then save that high score to the file and run the save high score method. So that's just in here under reset, and I've just gone a little bit more verbose. So if the score that the player got is larger than the current high score, just run save high score and set the current high score variable, which we've got up here, set that to the current score, right? So that the game is tracking what the high score is for his next run into the game. Okay, let's bring that back up once more. Okay, here it is, here. So, okay, the tutorial's got, so this bit is written in the game root, and that's just underneath where you've got, in the same section, let's bring it up here. In the same section that you've got all your screen drawing text, so under the draw method, draw here in the game root class, you'll have this bit already, so sprite batch.draw string, and that's just to draw how many lives the player has and what the multiplier is, right? And the current score. So all that's there, and then just above that you want to put this if player status dot is game over, we want to draw some text to the screen. So all this is saying is draw this text here, display a game over, display the player's current score, and display the current high score, so they can have a look and see how well he's done. Okay, so text size here is just used in the draw string method down here to draw that game over text to the screen. And there's a little bit of vector math going on here. Screen size, which is the size of the screen that we defined for the game, up in your game root, divided by 2 minus the text size divided by 2. So screen size divided by 2, so this is a vector. So it's dividing the x and the y and finding that position that's right in the middle of the screen. So right in the middle, right? Now we don't want to, right in the middle, I realize you can't see my finger pointing screen. So right in the middle of the screen, but then we need to subtract the current text size divided by 2 so that it's slightly off, so about here, so that the text is drawn right in the middle of the screen. Because if we don't subtract that, then the text will be drawn like here in this section. It'll be slightly off to the right a little bit. Okay, so that should be easy enough to understand. So draw that game over text to the middle of the screen. So this part, this is all good. You can just continue following the tutorial instructions. Is this bit here that he says, okay, so put this underneath the player status.remove life under the player ship.kill method. So it's this one here. Put in this respawn timer. So basically what we're saying here, so this is it here, we're going here, under the player ship in the kill method and underneath remove life. So after you remove the life from the player after he's died, what we're doing here is checking if the player is in game over mode once we remove that life. And game over mode will return true if that player has 0 lives left. Okay? So if the player has 0 lives left, we want to set the time until respawn to 5 seconds. And if it's not game over yet, so if he still has some lives left, we want to set the time until respawn to 1 second, right? Because if he still has lives left, we want the player to keep roaming around. and just have a 1 second respawn timer. But the idea of this 5 second respawn timer, he says in the tutorial, is that we want to give the player some time to have a look at the game over screen, so 5 seconds. But there's a problem with the logic here, and I'll show you what that means. So if you're up to this part of the tutorial, and you're following along with my tutorial, which is to have a multi-platform MonoGame project, you will notice that this actually won't run in Universal Windows, in your Universal Windows platform project at the moment. I'll go through that in a second. It's to do with the file saving, but I'll go through that in a second. So let's just fix this logic error first, all right? So just to make sure that it runs, I'm just going to set it to the Windows project, because I know this runs on Windows, and we'll just run it here. Alright, so here's our game. We've got 3 lives and score, so I'll just put a little bit of a score on, and then I'll just commit suicide here. That's 1 life, that's 2 lives, and this is one. Now when I die, it's going to be the last life, and it's going to return is game over as true. And look at that. What happened? Nothing, right? The game over screen is supposed to show up, but all that's happened is the player has just respawned after 5 seconds. So that timer worked, but the game over screen didn't show up. Now, let's have a look at this. Let's just close this. Okay, so is game over is triggered after the player loses his last life. Alright? Then time until respawn is set to 5,000. Alright, so 5 seconds. So that worked. Now, this check down here, which is when we run the player status.reset, this also runs when the player has 0 lives, alright? Basically, it's saying, is game over, enemy, player status.reset. Now, what this player status.reset does is it immediately puts lives back into the player, and because the game over status returns true if there's 0 lives, or false if there is more than 0 lives, it immediately gets switched back to false, right? That is no longer in a game over state. So when we're looking at the game root, on the next update, right, when we run this bit of code, we check, is it in a game over state, this loop? Well, immediately it says no, because what's happening here is we're setting, on the kill, okay, 0 lives, the last life. Okay, set time to respawn to 5,000, so it's 5 seconds until the next respawn, and then immediately we're putting lives into the player, and that is game over state becomes false all of a sudden. And that's why, if you have a look in your game root, the is game over state is only run once, so this might flash for a very tiny split second, and then immediately disappears. So that's why when we look at it, it's just all black, right? It doesn't show the game over screen. Now, this is just this is a logic error in the code. I tried to find the source code for the tutorial. I'm sure it works properly, but I must have implemented something wrong. And if you've been following along with my code, what I wanted to do, you'll have this error as well if you've been using my code anyway. What I wanted to do anyway is I didn't want to have a timer before the game started again, after the game over. I wanted to have the player press a button. So he can take however long he wants to look at the score before he continues on with the next game. So if I jump into source tree, I went ahead and I fixed that issue here. Okay, so let's check that out. Oh, it's into master. Okay, never mind. And we'll reload all of that. And the way that I fixed it here was player status. No way. Oh no, it's in the player ship. Player ship, yeah, in the player ship. So okay, so the way I've done it here is, okay, so the player is on his last life. He gets killed, alright? So we run the remove life, so now he's on 0 lives. And then I check if the player has 0 lives left, basically, so less than 1, then I manually I go on to play status and set game over to true. So if we have a look in the game over code now, I've just got game over. I've just got is game over as just a flat true or false that needs to be set by the game. Okay, instead of doing that return true or false, whether how many lives are left on the player. And that's important because that's the only way I can figure out how to get around this issue. Okay, so I want to switch immediately on the kill, switch the game over to true, and then this little bit of code runs on the kill. So if the game over is false, see that's what that little exclamation mark is. So if it's not in a game over state, that's fine. Just give him a 1 second respawn timer, and then continue on with the game. But if the game over state is true, then this won't run, and we'll go into the next update loop, and the next update loop has a check. It says, oh, is it in a game over state? And this is now returning true. And then we set the time until respawn figure, and I've set it to 250 milliseconds, and that's a very short amount of time, right? Because it doesn't really matter. This time that we've set here is how long the player will take to respawn after the player is ready to go, after he's pressed a button. Because in the next bit of code here, we wait, basically, in this bit. We have to wait. We're displaying the game over screen, so before the player has pressed any buttons, right, it's already in a game over state. And if we have a look at the game root draw method here, I haven't touched it. If it's in a game over state, display the game over text. So that's good. It's currently in a game over state. We're displaying the game over text, and we're waiting for the player to press A. So once the player presses A or presses the enter key, then we go ahead and run the player status.reset, and we set the game over state to false, because now we're starting a new game. Okay? And if he hasn't pressed any button, basically the update loop doesn't do anything. It just goes, sets that timer, and then returns nothing. It just exits out of the player ship's update. So nothing happens when the player ship's update doesn't do anything. And yeah, so that solves that logic error. So let's go ahead and run that, and we'll just make sure that that's running properly. I think I've reduced the lives to 2 lives, hopefully. So I don't have to die 4 times or whatever it is. 3 times, okay. I still have to die 3 times, so let's go put a little bit of score on the scoreboard. I think the other thing I want to do is also I wanted to increase the spawn at the start of the enemies, because sometimes you get this period where just nothing spawns. Alright, 35. Let's get killed. Alright, here we go. So now it's working correctly. So we've got the game over screen, and it'll stay on this game over screen until I press A or the enter key. And once you press the enter key, yep, so we started, you can see the score is back up to 0, and the lives are back up to 3, and we're starting the next game. So that's working real nice now. Okay. So, alright, so that's the logic error fixed. The other thing you want to fix is this. So if you're running UWP, and we run this game, so we'll run, oh crap. Stop. Sorry, it's trying to deploy to the Xbox at the moment. I'll probably have to skip this bit. Stop. Okay, that's fine. Okay, we want to change that to local machine. Alright, so we're running Windows UWP, so we'll just run that. And everything's fine, it's running. Okay, let's give this a crack now. I think we need to actually... Sorry, my dog's drinking. I think we actually have to put a score on so that it tries to write that file. Okay, let's die. Alright, so we're in the game over screen, and it's trying to write to the file, and we see the high score file, and you get this error here. you get this system unauthorized access exception. I can't write, basically saying I can't write to the file that you told me to write to. And this only happens in the UWP apps. And the reason for that is because, let's stop that. The reason for that is because Windows UWP applications run in this sandbox environment sort of thing. And they only have access to write files to certain locations. And one of those locations is their file, where their file locations, where the application lives basically, so that folder within the sandbox environment. So specifically for UWP apps, you have to define, you have to go and get the folder that the application is running from and then create the file in there, because that's one of the only places where you can actually create files in a UWP application. Alright, so let's jump into the source tree again and up to the latest bit of code. This is why it's great to have source control set up, right? Because I can just jump back and forth to the bits of code that I want to, especially when I'm doing these videos. So reload. Alright, so the only thing that I've changed here to get this working is I'm using, so for this bit you need to have a using windows.storage, and this will only work if you're using your UWP application. If you try to do this outside of the UWP, like in the Windows, it won't work. So we're using these if and if. What these tags are, so this hash and the if, they're called pre-compilation directives, or pre-compilation something or other. So what this is telling the compiler to do is to only compile this code if this app is a Windows UWP app. Now, thank you very much to the MonoGame community forum for this, because I could not find out what this keyword is supposed to be to make the code only run for Windows UWP. I put UWP, Windows Universal, Universal Windows Platform, all this stuff. It didn't work. I looked online, there was nothing. I had to put a post on the community forums, and that's great. I'll put a link down there anyway, although it's pretty easy to find. But yeah, if you wanted to go into it, I'll put a link downstairs into the description. Alright, so you want this. You want to go using Windows storage and only for Windows UAP apps or Windows UWP apps. And then in here under your player status, we're going to go ahead and define the Windows UWP specific code for the high score file name variable. So for the high score file name variable, for a UWP app, we go and get the application folder pathway, so wherever this code happens to be running, and then create a highscore.txt file in there, and then we put that full file name into the highscore file name. And if it's not a Windows UWP, so if it's anything else like a Windows or OpenGL, then just create the file wherever the executable is running, and that works beautifully. So once you've changed that, your high score should be working in your save high score. So this is where the error was happening. So I did find a whole bunch of stuff about writing files in UWP, and it was like using this asynchronous file recording thing, and it was just more complex and was further away from what was written in the tutorial. I wanted to stay mostly as close as I could to what our author was sticking to. So yeah, I didn't use any of those other asynchronous file writing methods. I just kept with the same stuff. And also it's easier for this video for you guys to follow along, because yeah, basically all you need to do is put that in there and put that in there, and you're good to go. Alright, so this is great. So you can see now, if I run this now on the local machine under Universal Windows, we should be able to start recording some high scores. I don't think I can get a high score though, and you might have to trust me that it works, but let's give it a crack, see what I can do here. This is a Let's Play GeoWar / NeoVector tutorial, NeoVector shooter. Alright, get a bit of a score, 74. I find actually the best way to get a score. Oh shit. Okay. Okay, there we go. So we got a high score. So now it's going to record this to the file. So I'm going to press A now. And it looks like it's worked, but just to make sure, let's just die a couple times just to see it reporting the new high score, which is, I think it was like 140 or something. There you go. So it looks like it's working now. Windows UWP. Fantastic stuff. And I hope you like the change to make the game over screen stay until the player presses a button. The other thing I wanted to change was if it's in a game over state, run the enemy spawning so that it gives the player sort of a feeling that oh, he's dead now, and because he's dead all the enemies are spawning and it gets crazy, right? So I think I'll implement that as well. If you're following along in my GitHub, the code for everything that I've written is downstairs in the GitHub in the description, and episode 1 is also in the description, and yeah, that's it, guys. Alright, so I think that's the end of the tutorial. The next one, basically the end of the gameplay bits in the tutorial anyway. The next one we're going to be adding sound and music, and that's going to take us to the end of section 2 of the tutorial, and that's pretty cool. And then the episode after that, we're going to be looking at putting in Bloom into the game. And I also wanted to let you know, I checked that file writing stuff for UWP on my retail Xbox, and that it's all working as well. So I run it against multiple sessions to make sure that it was using the same high score and keeping track of that, and that's all working good. So yeah, if you have a look at my code in the GitHub repo, you should be able to get that running on your Xbox as well. And I've got a video on how to deploy to your retail Xbox, which I'll put up in the description now as well, up in the link upstairs now, and down in the description too. Alright, thank you for watching, guys. I'll see you next time.